Hello, welcome to Bring on the Sabbath.
Hey everyone.
We are here 12 feet under Atlanta. Yes. Yes.
That's actually right.
Yes, it is right.
I'm mad I can't yell at you.
Yeah.
I'm mad I can't
Welcome
yell
back everyone. Hope your week was really good.
at you. Yeah, I had a lot of tests at my school.
So congratulations on surviving.
Yay!
You made it through.
Yay, elementary school.
Now we're ready for the Sabbath. It's where we can all just sink back in our chairs a little bit.
I believe we're having movie night at our house.
Are we having movie night after this?
I don't know.
We'll see if I can stay awake for it.
I'm tired.
Yeah.
That's why we have that couch bed.
Oh, okay.
Side conversation.
Well, welcome to the show. We have some exciting things for you.
Oh yeah, I've worked for 2 weeks on one of the things.
So
And
we have Connor's Corner.
We had a small preview last week, I believe. Was it last week or did we
Yes.
skip a week? Okay.
And then we have a guest this evening.
Yes, we have President of the Bible Sabbath Association, Kelly McDonald, will be here this
He's
evening.
right behind you guys.
Okay.
He's waiting
In the wings.
in the wings, ready to be on the show.
But first we have Connor.
Yes.
But before Connor, let's do a few announcements.
Yeah, we have a few announcements to make.
Oh. I'm gonna go poof.
All right. What do you want to
Yeah,
first?
first announcement, I want to talk about the CGI Digital Network app.
Okay.
This is I think it's the best way to get, and we have a slide for it also. It's the best way to get our content from Church God International. We have thousands of sermons, videos, Armor of God. You can watch Bring on Sabbath live, our other live Sabbath services on there. The radio network that we have. There's so much content and things that you can access on the CGI Digital Network, and we've now shared it with over 7,500 people who have downloaded it to their phones or their Apple TV or the Roku devices. And so we're encouraging, if you have not tried or downloaded the CGI Digital Network app, please do.
I believe we did on our TV, did we?
Yes, we have it on our TV
If we
set
didn't,
upstairs.
I was just gonna say, I'm running upstairs real quick. Well, during the commercial breaks, which is in 3, 2, 1, I'll get there.
And you get more information at cgi.org/app, and there's a link on right there in the menu to get to the app.
Great.
Right, and then next thing is I just wanted to remind everybody about the CGI Summer Family Retreat. That is July 23rd through 26th in Medina, Ohio. Information about that, again, is on the front of our website. You can click the link to get to the retreat. We're going to be doing all kinds of fun things there.
Yes.
Like, for example...
So we're not only doing family events, we're really excited that we're going to have these different tracks available for different ages. So we'll have like Sabbath school classes at the Sparks level, which is up to age 12. We will have seminars for the Ignite age group, which is the teenagers. Mm-hmm. And then we'll have interactive workshops for the Infuse age group, which is up to age 30 to 35. But anyone that, adults older than that are obviously welcome, anyone that's there as a family.
Yeah.
But yes, then we'll have some family fun. We have an outing planned at a lake. With a picnic. I think we're going to do some inflatables.
Yes.
We're going to do the family.
I'm coming.
We're going to do family PEP, praise, education, and prayer. A lot of fun things. Good for the whole family. It's going to be great.
And it's a church event, so there'll be food.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Way too much of it.
Yeah, the hotel you can find, it's on the website. It's only $99 per night, and all other food is included.
Yep.
So
the way we set this up is you're paying for your hotel room for the 3 nights, Thursday, Friday, Saturday night. But then everything else, all the activities, all the food is included. So we have it already set up on the CGI website that you can go ahead and register, and you can go ahead and get your hotel room.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Ready.
what you waiting for, right?
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
I'm going to cut to a quick commercial break so you can get
No commercial break.
Stop. You're going to confuse the poor camera guy.
Yes, we're thankful that we have Paul McIntyre, who's actually running the cameras and the switching tonight. He's been on the program, and now he's behind the scenes helping us out. And we're so happy to have Paul help out tonight with that.
2 weeks ago?
A few weeks ago.
And then the last announcement that we just want to continue to talk about is the Seaside Women's Retreat that will be happening this summer as well. That's June 26th through 28th, and it will be at the resort there in Lake Texoma, Texas. And I think we actually do, when we do go to commercial break, No. We do have a commercial that talks more about that and gives more details. But there's also a link to that on the CGI website for ladies who are interested in attending that. All right. So do we have all the announcements out of the way?
I think is that all the announcements?
I think so.
I think that's it.
All right. Connor, guess what time it is?
Lunchtime!
No.
Wait, no, it's not even time for lunch.
It's time for
Connor's Corner!
So, Connor has been so excited and looking forward to this evening.
Oh, yeah, it's been, like
Because
I said, you got a sneak preview last week. If you missed last week, you'll see what it is.
All right, can I set the stage for a minute? And then you talk?
This is Connor's Corner. Okay, fine.
Okay. So, as we're continuing to figure out Connor's place on this show and what is valuable information for others or would be interesting for other kids to hear. So one of Connor's favorite things is a game called Minecraft.
See that slide up there? That's Minecraft letters.
So Minecraft can be used as a video game.
Yes.
But it can also be used as a
digital building game.
As a digital building game. So,
exactly.
So Connor loves building whole worlds in this program.
I love building houses. I love building these random roofs on the ground that don't do anything.
So we were talking about stuff and came up with the idea of
building Bible stories in Minecraft.
Building Bible stories in Minecraft. Because it's a way for him to combine something that he's really interested in with also
it's my only skill.
with the passion that we're trying to instill in him for God and for learning and for the Bible, all of that really important stuff. So the first Bible story that he decided that he wanted to build in Minecraft is
Noah's Ark.
So he has taken 2 weeks. And we're not going to set up the gaming system down here and have you walk through it.
No.
So what we did do is take some screenshots.
Yes, it was not actually that hard. I just used my Nintendo Switch, took screenshots, and then Jeff took pictures of them this morning.
I took pictures of them with my phone.
So what we're going to do is let Connor show you these screenshots and talk through a few things about Noah's Ark. All right, what do we got, Connor?
So this is basically like the front of the ship. As you can see on board, there's a load of villagers.
So try to talk to the camera. Look at this. Look up there to see what your picture is, and then try to talk to people.
So if you see right up there on the deck, you see the little guy with the hat. If you see a little guy with a hat up in the, you guys, what is there? It's my left.
Okay. There's a guy, and who's the guy?
That's Noah.
Okay.
But I'm not pointing at him. But if I pointed at him, you could easily see his
Okay, so this is the front of the ship.
name.
All right, what do we got next?
Next, this is the side of the ship, just to give you a general idea of the ship's size. Don't pay attention to anything at the bottom in my hotbar.
Connor, don't worry about that. They're not worried about that. But you built this brick by brick and piece by piece.
It took me 2 weeks.
Okay. So was the Ark a small boat or a big boat?
Big boat. I believe that is about 120 blocks long and...
So we didn't do this in precise cubits.
That's about 250 blocks long and I'd say about 50 blocks high.
Okay.
It took me about 2,000 blocks in total.
So that's a lot of gopher wood.
Yeah.
Yep.
If I did that in survival, trust me, I'd be chopping down too many trees.
All right, what's next?
So this is basically the animal area, basically. as you can see, there's llamas and horses and sheep and wolves and donkeys and mules
So you took all the different animals that are in Minecraft
and polar bears.
and put them in pens here on the ark.
They're nice pens. They're nice pens. Don't make it sound like I'm being evil.
No. Now, what in this picture is not perfectly accurate to the Bible story?
Perfectly accurate is I don't know. Oh, all the clean animals there's Noah staring at us.
Okay.
In the corner behind the llama.
Okay. What were you starting to say?
So basically, in the Bible it says 7 pairs of clean animals, but I do not have enough room, surprisingly. Because
this is for illustration purposes only.
Yeah. So I just put 4 of each. You probably can't see the 4th sheep. You probably can't see the 4th sheep up there, but you can probably see at least 3. There's probably 1 hiding behind Lud.
Okay. All right. What's the next picture?
Next one is just another view
Of just
Noah.
how long this boat is and how many different types.
Just a view
of
of
animals.
Noah taking care of the animals. It's
Okay,
Noah
so
taking care of the
there's
animals.
Noah taking care of them. That's really good.
Yeah, I didn't even put Noah there. He's just very cooperative.
All right.
It's
What's
good.
next?
These are the dorms that basically Noah and his family stay in. There's 8 of them. This is Noah's room. This is this is Noah's room. They all look exactly the same. But still,
Okay.
that's Noah's room.
And what did you put in there?
You see that little gray thing in the corner?
Mm-hmm.
That's a furnace. I put a bookshelf next to it.
Okay. Well, I guess they had to save the books too.
That you can see in there right next to underneath the torch.
Mm-hmm.
You can see the bathtub, which is actually a cauldron / sink / water source.
Okay.
And then there's a chest, and back there you might see a little sliver of brown and then white. That's a bed.
Okay. All right. So everything you need.
And that's Noah's room there.
Yeah, that's Noah's.
But you said you made 8 of those?
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
so everybody has their own sleeping quarters
Yeah,
Which is
they
very
all
important.
Look exactly
Yes.
the same in case you're wondering.
when you're not long on the ark, I guess.
Okay.
This is the front of the storage room. This is the front of the storage room. Basically, if you remember from the first picture, there's like this little tent area. This is underneath it. It looks like a little tiny
You have 3
cover.
levels.
This is the underneath area. As you can see, those llamas aren't supposed to be there.
So the llamas got loose.
No, they just spawned there.
So that was probably an issue on the
And-
ark. Every once in a while, an animal was where it wasn't supposed to be.
And you can obviously tell. See those little things that look a little different than wood blocks? Those are barrels. And 2 of them, which are right underneath the llamas, that is I actually have 2 things in there. I actually have things in there.
Okay. What's in there?
I have a few swords in case. What? There are giant sea creatures like sharks.
Okay. All
You
right.
had to worry about sharks.
Okay.
And there's a bow.
All right. So there's all the storage on the bottom level, right?
And,
Right.
Yeah, that's like just showing you what it looks like, all the barrels.
Which makes sense. I mean, you don't know how long you're going to be in there.
There's not much in there. There's not.
No, you don't know how long you're
And
going
then
to
at
be in
the
the ark.
end, if we slide to the last picture, this is an automatic storage system. Trust me, the redstone was hard.
Yeah.
For those who actually play Minecraft, redstone is like circuits.
Okay. So what happens if you push one of those buttons?
So say you push the button on with the stake on it, underneath the stake. It shoots. You see that little thing that looks like a face?
Uh-huh.
That shoots out steak.
So the theory here was that if they spend all day making their own food, then they didn't have any time left to take care of the animals.
They just had to make it when they were building the ark, and then they
Stored it.
and then they stored it all in those little hole thingies.
And
And trust
this-
me, it actually works.
So then this would just automatically dispense their food
Yeah,
nice and
just
quick.
like vending machine, except it doesn't cost you money.
So a vending machine on the ark. All right, is that all the pictures?
And if you're wondering why it's not curved like from the front of the boat, like all the little thingies, they're like that. That was like that. Well, because I had to put a wall so I had enough room for the redstone.
Okay, so to build all the behind-the-scenes stuff.
To build
All right,
how it works.
So when you did all this, what did that help you either learn about that Bible story or just appreciate more or get a
Well,
better understanding of?
It gave me a better understanding how big the ark was and how long it might have took Noah to build it.
Do you know how long it really did take him?
100 years.
Yep, 100 years.
I was told.
Yeah.
So,
And it took you how long?
2 weeks.
and that already felt like forever, right?
Oh yeah.
So you can't imagine working on that for 100 years.
I wouldn't be alive.
All right. Well, Connor, thank you so much for telling us and showing us what you did.
I hope you guys appreciate it because it doesn't wasted 2 weeks.
And if nothing else, I hope you just see this as an example of a way that you can try to incorporate some biblical teachings and understanding with something your children already enjoy doing.
All right, wonderful. So that was Connor's Corner.
Now we're going to cut to a commercial break.
I guess what I'm going to do is I'm going to give Paul, our new guy, make sure he's got the commercial ready, and when I see him nod, which he did, we will. I'll now let you, Connor, you can say it now.
Let's cut to a commercial break.
All right.
Yes, I know that's due today. Yes, and the cupcakes for the soccer game. I'll do the best I can to get that to you. Yep, I'll do my best. Anything else? Want me to watch your kids this weekend? Okay. And the dog? Sure, let me add that to my list. Okay, sure. Okay, okay. Sure. Yeah. Can you hang on a second? I gotta go.
If you don't have a magic seashell, we invite you to relax with friends and be refreshed by God at Seaside Escape. Wish you could have a day at the beach? Time with girlfriends for laughing and sharing. Time with God reflecting, praying. You can at Seaside Escape. It's a retreat where you'll have time with girlfriends, time with God, time for relaxation and refreshment. Join the women in our church at a sparkling, splashy, beach-themed retreat. Seaside Escape.
All right, we are back, and we are joined by almost a regular, but I mean regular over the years.
Absolutely.
Kelly McDonald.
We haven't compared to see if you still have been on more of these shows than I have. We might have to do a count afterwards.
I think you probably beat me out a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. You've been on what? This is your fourth or fifth show?
I think
Bring on
my
Sabbath?
third or fourth.
Third or
something
fourth.
like that,
Okay, yeah.
All right, then I think I finally pulled in the lead.
You pulled ahead of me. It's
Yes.
all right, but I'm going to catch up maybe.
Yeah. So good to have Kelly here in Atlanta. So we're not in Tyler, Texas. we're in Atlanta. Last time we were together, we were in Tyler,
Texas last April.
Yeah, April, he stayed at my house. It was like a whole different situation than what we have now. Like
He stayed at the bachelor
I
pad.
bet at the
Bachelor
batch
pad.
pad last time.
Because I think last year we had some conversations. We talked about the Bible, and then we had some talked about women.
We talked about women.
I was like, well, no, here's what I'm looking for. And then, like a year later, like I found her, and we're here, and so everything has changed.
It's been incredible, and thank you guys for having me on.
Yes, and you're engaged as well.
I'm
now, too.
engaged.
Things are changing.
May 18 is the day.
Wow.
Me and Jessica Lightcap.
All right.
She
so
will
we're,
be Jessica McDonald. Her mama told her when she was growing up she'd marry old McDonald. And I don't want to say I'm old or anything, and I don't have a farm, but McDonald, that you got that part right.
So you don't have a farm.
Don't have a farm.
Yet.
Not as
Yet.
yet. You
Yeah,
never
okay.
know what could happen.
And you made the mistake, since you weren't coming to Tyler, you were coming to Atlanta. What time did you tell us you were going to be here today? I think it started at like 2:30.
I said I'd be here between 2 and 3 originally, and then
And then it became 3.
Then it became 3 as we left, and then as we went through Chattanooga and Atlanta, it gradually got to about 4:30. So, the president did come to town today, so that caused some of the traffic mess.
Yeah.
We won't say whether it was you coming to town or the president.
Yeah.
Somebody drew a crowd.
People would actually move out of my way if they knew I was coming.
Yeah.
I would think. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm speculating there, but.
What's one thing I've learned since living here in Atlanta. When people tell you they're going to be at a certain time, and especially if they're not from Atlanta, add like an hour and a half to it.
Yes.
Because the traffic will slow you down here.
Speaking of president, there's some great comments on
Okay.
here, and one of my favorite ones, Ray says, Connor for president. He seems to be more intelligent than the competitors running. So, not to make this a political show, but I
Yeah.
thought that was cute. Thank you so much.
All right, yeah, and we have quite a few people who are watching here on Facebook. We kind of started
Yeah.
a little bit late on Facebook. I had to do a little working around on my phone to get it going, but it's going now. Thank you all for joining us on Facebook. Please share if you can. Share so that everybody can see this. We have quite a few watching, so please share. Share on YouTube, hit the notification bell, whatever you got to do, all those different things you can do.
Whatever the appropriate
Whatever appropriate thing is for
social
whatever you're
media
watching. Whatever you're
button
watching.
is.
We thank you for sharing, and things are so well. Yeah, so the president was in town today. He was here visiting the Center for Disease Control.
Yep,
CDC.
the CDC here is here in Atlanta.
They've been a little busy lately.
They have.
A little busy lately. And that's what I talked about a little bit last week about having faith and how important resting is to really having a good attitude and be able to
And staying
handle
healthy
staying
and-
healthy and staying healthy when you handle a crisis. So, and right now we have I think I have a nice little picture to put up here of I don't know if that's a coronavirus or not, but it's the picture I found on the free one, and it looks like a virus.
Looks pretty scary.
Yeah, it looks scary. And again, I think you'll see these kind of pictures like this on the news, and they're and the news people have a tendency to like kind of definitely want to make it hype and to make it be the worst possible scenario because that's how they get their ratings. All right.
Sell commercials.
Sell commercials. But so right now in our country, again, we've seen it happen, started in Wuhan, and we've seen this virus spread around the world. And now we are starting, as many have seen, and I've read a lot of different papers from medical journals, that they kind of predicted that, yes, it will, because it's really hard to stop people from traveling or
Touching their face.
touching their face, or people's going to slip through the cracks. So some people have slipped through the cracks. It's spreading around our country, in the natural way or whatever. What do they call that?
Community spread?
Community spread, yes. So I have, Ann's my brain for the things I can't remember. Thank you.
What's that word?
What's that word, Ann?
That means you know a lot of words.
Yeah, you know a lot of words. And so community spread, and so what's going on in our country is a lot of quarantining. I think they're in New York, that they're quarantining 2,500, maybe more than that now. And again, the numbers I'm giving you right now may be wrong because they change every hour.
Yes.
It's something that's going to happen. They're closing schools in parts of the country. They canceled festivals. They're canceling basketball games, or I think Kelly told me something about they're only going to
NCAA D3 tournament, Division III tournament. They're not going to allow fans into games.
So they're still going to play the NCAA tournament. Now we're talking about Division III, not Division I yet. They haven't made any decisions on Division I. So don't rebel just yet. No uprising.
They're considering it, though.
They're considering it, of playing the games in empty stadiums.
Yeah.
It'll be like practice, sort of, but it counts.
Yeah, I heard actually doing that a lot with maybe some soccer games or rugby games in Europe, and even performances in like theaters. They'll perform without an audience and just broadcast it. So again, just because a lot of countries are passing things to kind of keep people from congregating, because you have like one person walks through a crowd of 100 and maybe half the people
they canceled Comic-Con.
And they canceled the Comic-Con in Seattle. The streets are empty. The famous fish market, where, if everybody's ever seen the fish market, they throw fish around. It's like a real famous place. It's like nobody's there. Nobody wants to get fish thrown at them, I guess, during an outbreak. So it's just something that's happening in our country, and the thing is quarantine. And the thing of the quarantine is, and I wanted to read a verse from Leviticus 13, and there's so much in the Bible about quarantine, but I want to read this from Leviticus 13 and this is more where they were dealing specifically with skin irritations because of, I guess they were in the desert, and this was more common. Is like different, it would be called leprosy or skin irritations or different colors and stuff. And so the priests would be trained to identify what is something that could be spreadable and what's something that's benign, contagious and not contagious. And so this deals with leprosy, but the idea of quarantine deals with all disease. And actually, this is actually something we can see that the Bible is more advanced than probably any other holy book. It definitely is. It's more advanced than the other holy book, more advanced than the science was at the time. Because they did not understand germs and viruses until the beginning of the 20th century.
Modern times.
Yeah, modern times. We started to understand this is how germs work. And they weren't even washing their hands in hospitals before they found out that what germs were. But the Bible talks about washing hands, talks about washing pots and pans, washing clothes after these people are sick, or even burning their clothes after they have a disease.
It's true.
So these are things that are
very important,
showing that the God of the Bible, the God who, again, maybe the people who wrote it didn't understand why God was telling this, but God designed this world. God knows that because of sin, these viruses and these bacteria entered into the world, and God knew how they were transmitted, and so He was giving them really great advice about quarantining people. All right, so here we're going to read in verse 45. All right, verse 45 of Leviticus 13. It says, "Now the leper on whom the sore is, his clothes shall be torn, and his head bare, and he shall cover his mustache and cry, 'Unclean, unclean,'" which definitely keeps that 6 feet distance away from people, like they try to tell you. Warning, I am contagious. He says, "He shall be unclean. All the days he is the sore, he shall be unclean." Right, so until the sore's gone, he's unclean, and he shall dwell alone. His dwelling shall be outside the camp. So that's an important thing to understand, that when we talk quarantines, and again, quarantines are probably the best way to stop a virus. I mean, vaccinations and medicine and all that, but the best way to stop a virus is to keep it from spreading to other people. If you can stop it in every case, which is going to be very difficult, but they're going to try.
Sure.
That's the best way to prevent others from being infected. And I guess it's important for us and when we're in church, that if you're in church and you have a fever, good idea, don't go to church with a fever, because odds are it's not going to be this coronavirus. It'd probably be a flu or a cold. I mean, there's only, again, in the whole world, there's 100,000 cases of this. There's 350 million people in our country. There's 1.5 billion people in China, and only 100,000 have it. So it's a very small percent of the population. But the thing is, it is spreading. So again, if you're in church, you shouldn't go to church with a fever. You should, and spread germs, especially to the elderly and those who are older, who are very susceptible not only to this, but even colds or flus, which can cause problems. So again, this kind of shows that the thing that we're using now in the world to control this was in the Bible thousands of years ago, because God knew it. You're not going to find it in the Quran. You're not going to find it in other holy books or even science books of the day, because they didn't understand, but God understood. Because God created the world. And again,
That's
these again, it's there because of our fall, because of sin.
Right.
These things entered, and it's part of our process of enduring in the
And
world.
learning that God is smarter than we are.
Yeah, and God is smarter than we are, and we got to again, don't panic, don't panic. Have faith. You know, God will take care of you, regardless of what happens. Right, even if you were to catch it and by you know the worst case scenario, pass away. You have a place in God's kingdom if you follow Him and you're doing what's right. So again, nothing to worry about. Just something that we know that we as a country are going to go through. There's going to be a lot of quarantines. I would say the reason why it works is because God says it works.
So have faith, wash your hands.
Wash your hands.
And I think it highlights just how important this technology that's being used tonight is, because if the country were to go into a broader quarantine status, you know, you're going to see shows like this. CGI also does like a Wednesday night Bible study, Sabbath services. And so this technology, the importance of it becomes, you know, highlighted even more in light of this.
Yeah, if you're staying at home, at least we have something you can
You're
watch.
always welcome to join us
That's right.
over there.
Yeah, so I just want to talk about this a little bit because,
It's
again,
important.
it's something that's on everyone's mind. It's on all the news. It's something that's going to be affecting us. Just looking at science and statistics, it's going to be affecting our whole country within the next few weeks. The cases will rise. They will close things off. They will do their best to quarantine, and it's going to go away. It's the way things happen. It'll go away eventually.
Right.
We just got to endure, put our faith in God, faith, you know, and be there for each other in the church, and you know,
And wash your hands.
and wash your hands. Wash your hands for 20 seconds. You ever try to wash your hands for 20 seconds? It's a long time to wash your hands for 20 seconds, but I understand why it works, because that's really gets in there and gets rid of
Deep
those
in your
germs.
skin, yeah.
All right.
All right.
So we're gonna go to another commercial break when I get the sign that we can go to one, and we get back, and we have a really interesting presentation you have for us.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about commonly misunderstood verses. You know, we've all in our lives, as we've been walking out the commandments of God, we've experienced people bring up something from the letters of Paul or something from the prophets, such as Isaiah, and they've quoted verses out of context to say something that they don't actually say. And so in this segment, we're going to go through these verses. We're going to give you a proper interpretation and context and explanation of those verses. And we're going to help you understand why that is the proper interpretation. So it's going to be I'm really excited about it, and I think it's going to really encourage you. So stay tuned for it.
Located a short train ride from New York City, by car, an hour's drive away. Situated along the Hudson River lies the village of Fishkill, this year's Feast of Tabernacles site in New York. Join us as we gather together to be inspired by God's Word, to celebrate His plan for the future, and to enjoy the company of our brothers and sisters in Christ.
All right, we are back. We are back. Before we get started, I had a couple of comments I wanted to read on here. I think Ann may have some about the last thing, because Amy Hohert says the green stuff, the little thing we had about the coronavirus, it looks like the stuff that made the Incredible Hulk. so I guess it was gamma radiation and viruses or whatever that made the Hulk. And then another thing she says is couldn't the players make each other sick, whether they're fans there or not? And that's the thing.
Well, that's a good point.
Because they're up, the players may get sick, but the fans aren't there. So yeah, so that I guess they're just trying to minimize exposure and say, well, the players can go out there, but
the players are on. A lot of them are on scholarship. The schools have set up these games. There's TV deals to show them, and there's commercials that have been paid for. That's kind of why they still got to play the game. And
yeah, again, we'll see what happens.
At least theoretically, still play.
Do you have any comments on our CGI.churchonline.org, which you can also make comments on?
We have some proponents that we should switch from handshaking and hugging at church to fist bumps.
Yeah, fist bumps, I heard, spread 1/5 the amount of viruses. Because when you shake your hands, you're putting like about 5 million germs, and a good fist bump's only about 1 million. So.
What if you do an elbow bump?
I think the elbow bump, and there's one thing, I don't know if I can demonstrate. I'm not going to get up and demonstrate. They call it like the Wu hand shake or whatever. Where you like
you tap your
tap
toes to each other.
Yeah. So again, I think I mean, don't be offended if somebody wants to do that, because definitely it's the time that, again, especially with the flu even and different things going around. Keep the germs to yourself, kind of thing.
Yep.
That's true. That's a good point.
All right. So without further ado, I want to hear more.
Yeah. What do we got?
Yeah. So tonight we're going to talk about commonly misunderstood verses. And I want to start by saying this. The Bible is the greatest book, work, manuscript, whatever you want to call it, that's ever been written. And it is inspired from the beginning through the end. My pastor says Genesis through maps. As he says, some will say Genesis through Revelation. And it is inspired by God. And I want you to understand that there are some verses that are commonly taken out of context or misunderstood. We are not saying, I want to clarify this, we're not saying that these verses are not inspired. We're saying the way that people interpret the verses have an inconsistency with the rest of the Bible. That's what we're talking about. And so the first one we're going to look at is Isaiah chapter 1, verses 13 through 14. Isaiah chapter 1, verse 13 through 14, which says this: "Stop bringing meaningless offerings. Your incense is detestable to me. New moons, Sabbaths, and convocations, I cannot bear your worthless assemblies. Your new moon feasts and your appointed festivals I hate with all my being. They have become a burden to me. I am weary of bearing them." And so there have been a lot of theologians and a lot of pastors and other teachers of the Bible for centuries now, really since about the late 2nd, early 3rd century, who've tried to say that these verses are talking about, God is condemning the Israelites for keeping His Sabbath, Friday sunset to Saturday sunset, for keeping His holy days, which are listed in Leviticus 23. Now, I want to go... again, this next slide here just says these verses are commonly cited to say that God hates the Sabbath and the holy days, and therefore we should stop celebrating them. Now, when we go deeper in the Bible, we're going to find there's a different explanation for these verses. Right. Now, I want you to notice something very important. If we could go back to the verses for just a moment, the verses in question, I want you to notice that when God talks about the new moons, the Sabbaths, the convocations, the festivals in these verses, He says your. Notice that, right?
He's not saying mine.
He's not saying my holy days. He's not saying my Sabbath. He's saying your worthless assembly, your new moons, your holy days. All right. So that's very important for us to realize that God calls these days your Sabbaths, yours holy days. Now, how does God describe His Sabbaths? It's very important for us to understand. If we read Exodus chapter 20, verse 10, God says that this day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. He does not call it the Sabbath of the Israelites. He does not call it the Sabbath of the Jews. He does not call it the Sabbath of the Israelites. He calls it the Sabbath of the Lord your God. I had a good friend of mine one time who said, well, you keep the Jewish Sabbath and I keep the Christian Sabbath. Yeah. And there's never such terminology used in the Bible. There's only one Sabbath, and that is the Sabbath of the Lord our God. Then in the festivals, in Leviticus 23, verses 2 through 3, he says, these are the set feasts of the Lord, even these are my set feasts.
So there's nowhere where it says your.
That's right.
Yeah.
He doesn't call it your, because he's taking personal possession of these days because they're important to him. They have something to do with his plan for your life and my life.
He doesn't call it Israel's feast either, does he?
He doesn't call it Israel's feast. No, he absolutely doesn't. And I want to give you some context to these verses. So when we look at earlier verses in the Bible, one of the things that we learn about is we learn about a king named Solomon, which many people have heard about. But when we read 1 Kings chapter 11, we learn that Solomon turned away from God. And as a result, God took away 10 of the northern tribes of Israel away from his lineage, away from his son, and gave them to a man named Jeroboam. Now, here's what happened though. Jeroboam became fearful that the northern tribes would go back to Solomon's son, whose name was Rehoboam. Of course, I guess to be a king back then, your name had to be Aboam. I don't know, but Jeroboam though was afraid that even though the northern tribes had defected from Rehoboam to him, they might turn back. And so, you know, guys, we read the Bible. Fear is never a good motivator. We're not talking about the fear of God, but we're talking about a worldly fear. It's not a good motivator to act upon. And Jeroboam turned away from God. There's three things that he did. He set up golden calves. Number two, he let anyone be a priest, which contradicted the covenant God had made with the son, Aaron and his sons. And number three, he established his own festivals. Now, this is found in 1 Kings chapter 12, verses 25 to 33. And I actually have a quote on the next slide. 1 Kings 12:33. It talks about Jeroboam. On the 15th day of the 8th month, a month of his own choosing, he offered sacrifices on the altar he had built at Bethel. So he instituted the festival for the Israelites and went up to the altar to make offerings. So what happened starting with the time of Jeroboam is that the northern tribes of Israel, they started their own festival days. And here, what Jeroboam was trying to do is he was trying to move the Feast of Tabernacles from the 7th month to the 8th month and establish his own celebrations. And so, and here's the other thing, though, they stopped keeping God's festivals. Here's a verse from Ezekiel chapter 22, verse 26 on the next slide. God said this, they shut their eyes to the keeping of my Sabbaths so that I am profaned among them. Now notice that God takes personal possession of his Sabbaths and says the children of Israel were not obeying his Sabbaths. They were obeying it. They were obeying their own. So let's go to the slide that says think it through at the top. Whenever we try to come to an understanding of different scriptures in the Bible, we want to think it through. In other words, we want to say, if my interpretation is true, how does it apply with the rest of the Bible? Am I making God look contradictory, or is it going to mess with some other part of the Bible?
Does it fit?
But you're telling us, because what you read makes perfect sense if you've read the Bible.
That's right.
So there's people out there, scholars, who try to use those verses.
That's right.
And say that God doesn't like his own holy days.
That's exactly right.
That makes no sense.
It makes no sense. Yeah. And so in the slide, think it through. That's the first bullet point here is, would God give holy days in the Sabbath and then get mad at you for doing what he said? Where in the Bible can you show, did Israel and Judah get sent into captivity because they obeyed God or because they disobeyed? It's because they disobeyed, right? Therefore, this is not a legitimate interpretation of the Bible, because it would make God seem very unjust and God would be contradictory to his own purpose. So the language makes it clear. This is what was going on. Number one, they stopped keeping his Sabbath, his holy days, and they started keeping their own. And something else I want to throw in here, if you were to study earlier in the 1900s, there was some archaeological work done in the city of Samaria. Now that was the capital city of the northern tribes of Israel. And Samaria, they found what they now call the Samaria Ostracon. And in the Samaria Ostracon, they found all these names of people who lived in the northern tribes of Israel during about the time of Jeroboam, really just after. And there are many people who have Baal as a part of their name. And it shows you that this pagan worship had continued and literally continued until the children of Israel were taken into captivity in the 700s BC. So that's the first verse that we wanted to talk about, was Isaiah, to show you God is not angry with you if you keep his Sabbath and his holy days. God is going to be there with you and help you and bless you for obeying Him. He would not condemn you for obeying something He said to do that would make Him contradictory and therefore not perfect. So that's the first verse. The next verse that we want to get to, we got two sets of verses from the Apostle Paul. Now, the Apostle Paul wrote letters to instruct the churches, but some of Paul's words are taken out of context. And you got to understand, the Apostle Paul was one of the most knowledgeable people of his day. He was not just, say, a common person by his understanding and study. He was a scholar. In fact, one ruler in the book of Acts said that his learning had driven him mad. That's how knowledgeable he was. Now, one of the ways that we study history and that we learn about people in ancient times is something called a primary source. A primary source is a person or archaeological finding from the same time period. So if we go to the next slide where it says 2 Peter 3:15 through 17, one of Paul's contemporaries was Peter.
Yep.
This is a primary source. And let's see what Peter had to say about Paul's letters. Verse 15 says, "Bear in mind that our Lord's patience means salvation, just as our dear brother Paul also wrote you with the wisdom God gave him." So he's talking about the Apostle Paul's writings, and here's what he says. He writes the same way in all his letters, speaking in them of these matters. His letters contain some things that are hard to understand, which ignorant and unstable people distort as they do the other scriptures to their own destruction. So what do we learn about the Apostle Paul? Number one, he will be saying the same thing throughout his letters, so he's consistent. Number two, some things in his letters are kind of hard to understand. And you know, Peter was a fisherman. When they were speaking in other languages in Acts 2, those guys were like, these are uneducated Galileans. How did they learn this? So he is telling, Peter's a common guy, and he's telling you, look, some stuff is hard to understand for most people, but we don't want to allow our interpretation to contradict the other scriptures. What's the other scriptures? The Old Testament.
Right.
They didn't have a New Testament. They only had the Old Testament.
But the thing he's saying, though, he's saying that today people are misunderstanding Paul.
That's
but
right.
back then, they were misapplying it.
That's a great
since
point.
he wrote it.
That's a great point. There were people in Paul's days misunderstanding it. You know, Paul had to correct errors in his day. In one of the Thessalonians chapters, letters, someone had tried to spread the rumor that Jesus had already come back. You know, you guys missed it, you know. So there were false teachings, and people were perverting Paul's letters and, you know, saying that he wrote letters that he didn't, or, you know, this was going on in his day. That's a good point.
And that's the thing with the way people are. We know the way people are today with news and fake news and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's just human nature for those things to happen. And
it is
for people
human nature.
to take things, misinterpret it, and spin it their own way, maybe for their own benefit or gain.
Are you familiar with the Nixon quote? So this is one of my favorites. It goes along with what you're talking about. This is a quote by Richard Nixon. "I know you think you believe you understand what you thought I said, but I'm not sure you realize that what you heard is not exactly what I meant."
That's a great point.
Even with certain politicians today, I won't get into them, the media will take what they say and completely distort it.
That's right.
Right? I mean, and
it happens right now.
I say the person that said this, and the media completely changes it, and that's what they're doing. That's what people do with Paul and what they're doing with Paul.
That's right. That's 100% right.
Yeah.
It's like when people will call you a cult because you keep the Sabbath.
Yeah.
Even though that's rhetoric and that's not true. And let me say this: I think a lot of people who misinterpret these verses they just don't know any better. But there are people out there who have a purpose to twist the scripture. They have an agenda because they want to protect their salary, or they don't want to lose followers, or they know. I've had people tell me who went to seminary, look, keeping the commandments and the Sabbath, I know that's right, but I was told that if I want a paycheck, I can't teach that. And I've had people tell me that. And so most people, your common Christian people out there, they don't know, but there are some people out there with bad intentions. Let's go to verse 17. "Therefore, dear friends, since you already know this, be on your guard so that you may not be carried away by the error of lawless men and fall from your secure position." So the last thing we want to remember about Paul is that we don't want to allow our interpretation to cause lawlessness. And so if our interpretation leads to lawlessness, it contradicts someone who is a primary source about the Apostle Paul, who said he never taught that way. All right. So let's get into the first one. Romans 14.
All right.
I love it. It's one of my favorite chapters, by the way. Romans chapter 14. I know and am convinced by the Lord Jesus that there is nothing unclean of itself, but to him who considers anything to be unclean, to him it is unclean. Yet if your brother is grieved because of your food, you are no longer walking in love. Do not destroy with your food the one for whom Christ died. Now, when you first read this, a lot of scholars, preachers, teachers of the word, etc., out there that are well-known people will say that this.
Hey, we can eat shrimp.
You can eat what you want
Yes.
to.
Yeah.
They'll quote this verse and say, "Eat whatever you want." But let me give you.
Unless you consider it unclean.
Right.
Then it's unclean for you.
Then it's just unclean for you. In other words, it's no longer a matter of God's word, it's a matter of your conscience. But before we get into the meat of this, literally, let's talk about context. How do we determine proper interpretation of the Bible? Number one, we consider the author, which we've already done that. Number two, we consider the audience, which we'll get into. Number three, we consider the surrounding verses. Number four, we consider the language. And number five, we consider the implications of our conclusion. So how does it all fit together? I want to start by going to verses earlier in the chapter, Romans 14, 1 through 2. Receive one who is weak in the faith, but not to disputes over doubtful things. For one who believes he may eat all things, but he who is weak eats only vegetables. Now, two things we learn here. Before we get to Romans chapter 14, verse 14 onward, verses 1 through 2 give us some guidance. Number one, we learn it's a doubtful thing. The NIV says disputable matter. In other words, this is not something you could go to the Old Testament and point to a specific
Thou
chapter and verse.
shalt not.
Right, you don't have
Right.
that for whatever the situation
Yeah,
is.
thou shalt not eat. You should only vegetables.
That's
you
right.
can't find that in Scripture.
It's not in the Scripture.
Yeah.
And that's the second thing you learn. This is not about what meat is okay. It's about whether or not we should be vegetarian or if God commands us to be vegetarian, if we're allowed to eat meat. So that's the setup we get. The second thing I want to go to is the language. There are two different Greek words for unclean in the New Testament.
Mm-hmm.
The first Greek word is koinos, and the second is akathartos. Now, in Romans 14, Paul only uses koinos, which means physically dirty, can mean defiled, but it has a connotation of physical dirtiness. Akathartos is the Greek word that refers to unclean animals and actually has the meaning of spiritual uncleanness. Akathartos is not even used in this whole chapter.
Mm-hmm.
So
there was a word he could have used.
there's a word he could have used, absolutely. And we'll get to that word because
So
he uses it.
this
in
might
the
be more similar to the verse you were reading a little while ago where the person who was physically sick was telling people, warning them, unclean, unclean. I doubt he was running around saying, don't eat me, don't eat me.
Yeah,
Right, because that would have never been on their mind, right?
Right.
Right. Yes.
That's true. That's true. And and here's something else about the language. You brought up the language. The Greek word Paul uses for food in verse 15 is broma. And it refers to the distinction between clean and unclean animals. You can look it up in the Strong's Concordance. It actually says that. So in Leviticus 11, God says some animals were made to be eaten, and those are called clean animals, and unclean animals are never called food, they're called unclean. We've got to understand this is not about clean and unclean food. This is about clean and unclean animals. Clean animals are food. Unclean animals are unclean. Now, why was this an issue? Let's get further into this. Romans 14:6. He who eats to the Lord, for he gives thanks. He who does not eat, to the Lord he does not eat, and gives thanks to God. You have to understand that in ancient Rome, we're going to get into history in the audience. In ancient Rome, there was a strong vegetarian movement. In fact, Seneca, who's one of the most well-known Roman authors, talks about how he was a part of a vegetarian cult for a while. And the word cult in ancient times just meant a mode of worship. And there were two main reasons people were vegetarian in those times as a part of a cult. Number one, they were trying to honor another god like Isis or Osiris. Those were vegetarian-based religions. Number two, though, they were superstitious sometimes. In ancient Greece, this actually developed in ancient Greece, there was this belief that if you ate animal meat, the soul of that animal would then enter into you.
That would be awful.
That's a crazy superstition. But this vegetarian movement was very strong in the time, and I could give you more primary sources from the time period. But so here's what Paul does in verse 6. He says, if you believe in eating, make sure you're doing it for the Lord, not to spite those who don't, And if you don't believe in eating meat, make sure you're doing it, what? For the Lord. So, let's summarize this. Paul is the one who wrote to the Romans. Some of these believers came out of belief systems that emphasized vegetarianism. After their conversion, they did not quite have the maturity of conscience to eat meat. They thought it was koinos, or physically dirty. Paul's conclusion is this: if a person considers broma to be koinos, then only for that person it is koinos. Broma can be eaten. Let's read another verse later in the chapter. Do not destroy the work of God for the sake of food. This is Romans 14:20. All food is clean, but it is wrong for a man to eat anything that causes someone else to stumble. The word translated as food here is, guess what? Broma. All broma is clean if you can eat it. Broma's clean. There is nothing weird about what he's saying. This is totally in line with the Old Testament. Reality cannot be changed by a person's weak conscience. Let's go to Romans 15:3. Let's read this verse. For everything that was written in the past was written to teach us, so that through the endurance and the encouragement of the Scriptures we might have hope. Why would Paul say this if he were trying to negate the Old Testament? Why would he tell you, hey, look, everything written in the past in the Old Testament is all to encourage you in the Scriptures. It is all to help you to pursue your relationship with God and represent Jesus Christ. So let's think it through. God made some animals clean and others unclean. That's Genesis 7:2. It's the first time that's mentioned. Those animals have the same characteristics today that they have always had. Now, Paul is not greater than God. He does not have the authority or the power to change the biology of an animal. Jesus did not die to change the biology of a pig. So if a pig has the same characteristics, God said in the Leviticus 11, it's either still unclean or God lied. Which is it? Well, God doesn't lie. Remember 2 Peter 3:15 through 17. Paul is not a teacher of lawlessness. In fact, let's go to 2 Corinthians 6:17. Let's go to a verse where he uses akathartos. Therefore, come out from them and be separate, says the Lord. Touch no unclean thing. Now, the Greek word translated as unclean here is not koinos, it is akathartos. And it refers to Leviticus 11, among other things, like a dead body. And so, Paul taught us not to touch the unclean thing. Therefore, he would not write another letter and say something contrary to it. Remember, Peter told us in 2 Peter 3:15 through 17 that Paul writes the same way in all of his letters. Now, the last passage we want to look at is 1 Timothy 4:1 through 5. And this is another verse that people use out of context. And let's read it. Verse 1, the Spirit clearly says that in the latter times some will abandon the faith and follow deceiving spirits and things taught by demons. Such teachings come through hypocritical liars whose consciences have been seared as with a hot iron. That's hot. They forbid people to marry, and I want you to notice the word and there. I've actually got that underlined for you. And order them to abstain from certain foods which God created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and who know the truth. For everything God created is good, and nothing is to be rejected if it is received by thanksgiving, because it is consecrated by the word of God and prayer. Now here's what people want to say about these verses. They want to say that if you're following Leviticus 11, you're out of God's will, and that your conscience is seared with a hot iron, that you're a hypocrite, and that you've fallen prey to this seductive spirit. But let's consider the following. If that assertion were true, if these verses applied to Leviticus 11, then the Bible can't be inspired, because that would make Jesus a hypocritical liar, and we know he is not. Think about it. Number two, a demon did not inspire Leviticus 11, right? The Bible's pretty clear, Leviticus 11, and God said, not what to eat or not to eat, okay? So no matter what interpretation we come to, it can't involve Leviticus 11 because the demon didn't give it, God did. And number three, we can't be hypocritical if we obey what God said. So what is Paul really saying? First of all, Paul says that this teaching would come in the latter times. Thus, it did not exist in his time. Unlike the earlier issue we read about from 2 Peter, this issue did not exist, but it would come about in later times. Secondly, This false teaching has two aspects to it. Number one, it forbids marriage. And the word "and" is of incredible importance because the Bible is a legal document too. It forbids marriage and forbids certain food. Now you can clearly see that these verses don't apply to those of us who believe in following Leviticus 11 because they just got married several months ago and I'm about to get married. So there you go. So again, what is Paul saying? Now the Greek word translated as certain foods, guess what Greek word that is? Broma. So these were the only animals that God created to be received with what? Thanksgiving. Now I want you to notice verse 5, and I've got it paraphrased there for you. Whatever animals he's talking about, they are sanctified by two things. Because some people say, well, if I pray over it, it's sanctified. That's not what it says. It is sanctified by the Word of God and prayer. That word "and" very important. The Word of God does not set unclean animals apart for us to eat. But the Word of God does set apart clean animals for us to eat. Now, so what is Paul saying? This false teaching forbids marriage and all clean animal meat. In the mid-2nd century AD, there were a number of heretics that arose within the ranks of Christianity and tried to change the faith. And some of them, guess what? Refused marriage and did not eat clean meat and told people not to, told them to be vegetarian, forced them and said it was God's will for them. And this prophecy was partially fulfilled through them. Some of those heretics, if you want to look them up, Marcion, Valentinus, Saturninus, these are some of the false teachers. Later, the Catholic Church would forbid their priests from marrying and would forbid certain kinds of meat on certain days, such as eating fish on Friday. And later, actually, Saturday became a day of no meat, and it was dedicated to the Virgin Mary by the Catholic Church. That's another conversation for another day. So the Catholic Church actually kind of continued it, but they were not the first ones to initiate it. It was the heretics of the 2nd century. Think it through. Number one, Paul never taught against the Old Testament. Number two, the Old Testament was the only 1st century text that the church had to go off of to learn about this belief that the Messiah had come, that their Savior of the world had come. Number three, if someone begins to use Paul to change different parts of the Bible, then who else can do that? Can the Pope do that? What other content can be changed? That's the other Pandora. This is a Pandora's box to allow this kind of interpretation. Here's the conclusion. God never condemns us for obeying His word, number one. And let me quote to you Peter. We could have gone to Peter's vision, but in 1 Peter 1, 15 through 16, here's what Peter said. But just as He who called you is holy, so be holy in all you do. The old King James will say in all manner of conversation. That means in all you do. Verse 16, for it is written, be holy because I am holy. Do you know where that, you see, it is written means it's written somewhere else, right? Do you know where else that's written? That's written in Leviticus 11, 43 through 45, which is a chapter on the dietary laws. Leviticus 11, and in Leviticus 20, 25 through 26, which, guess what? Talks about the difference between clean and unclean animals. And so, as we look at these verses, we can see that Paul is not trying to tell God that He's greater than the Creator. He is not trying to take authority over God in any way. He is simply having to address very specific issues, one of which was a prophecy, that's 1 Timothy, and the other, Romans 14, was an issue going on at that time among believers. So with these verses, having the proper explanation, and again, I go back to context. We've got to know about the author, and Peter cross-references the author for us. Number two, we've got to understand who he's writing to. But number three, it's good for us to get into the language. Because, the Bible was not written.
Those are three things we can do if we want to look at other verses.
100%.
Right.
And read the verses before and after. Compare it with other parts of the Bible. And think about the full conclusion of what you're saying.
The sanity check.
The sanity check. If your conclusion to the verse contradicts other parts of the Bible, that's a good chance that you're off kilter. And especially the language, and here's the thing, you don't have to be a scholar in language to do a language check. And sometimes you don't even need to get into the language. For instance, here's how I figured out that there was different Greek words. I saw where Paul said, touch not the unclean thing, 2 Corinthians 6:17. Then I read Romans 14 where Paul said, nothing is unclean of itself. And I said, wait a minute, that's a contradiction. Whenever there's a contradiction, the language many times will clarify it. And sure enough, that's what I found. You can get a simple Strong's Concordance. They've got the Blue Letter Bible. You can go on Google. eSword is a great resource.
eSword on my phone.
I use eSword all the time.
Yeah.
It's a tremendous resource. It's not very hard to use, and it will greatly help you, especially with verses that may seem to be a little confusing. As Peter pointed out, some of Paul's letters were.
A lot of times, like even while like I'm listening to a sermon in church, I'll check the wording and say, just make sure the person up there is like saying it correctly. I'm like, I'll say, is that word? Oh, okay, you got it. All right, because you can. There's definitely a way to double check things because it's an easy resource to use.
I mean, just think of the English language. I mean, how many different times? I mean, the first one that comes to my mind is the word bad. You know, there was a period of time where that was a slang term for it being
good,
really awesome, really amazing.
Now you have the Michael Jackson song in my head because of that.
But I mean, but that's what you mean. Like,
that's right. Exactly.
I would say, okay, well, we're talking about the 1990s.
Yeah,
that's true.
And in America, the word bad had several meanings.
That's absolutely right.
If you were reading something if you were reading the script of something 100 years later,
that's right,
and you lived in a different country, it could be quite confusing. In fact, how many movies have we seen where people are trying to learn English and it becomes a comedy because they don't understand all of the slang?
It's like reading Shakespeare. Right, because again, like if you read the King James, you're basically reading Shakespeare because this is the same time, and some people think maybe he may have had a hand in the King James translation. A lot of times Shakespeare, we lose a lot of the context because we don't understand, a lot of the culture.
No, that's right.
And so it's understanding all those things to understand, what's going on there. And the key is the things that we keep as the Church of God. The Sabbath, the holy days, the things that we teach about God, really it's not difficult to prove to yourself. You don't really even need us to do it. If you just do the study for yourself and look at the wording and compare things and just think about it logically. Because it's not that difficult. It's really straightforward. Most all of it.
Yeah, it's true. Well, even Leviticus 11. I mean, even though we may not know 100% the origins of the coronavirus, what were some of the early theories on it? Bats, snakes, an anteater, unclean animals.
Yeah, if you're eating unclean animals, and this is also, I think, with Ebola and other things that have jumped from animals to humans, is that people are eating monkey meat, or people are eating they're eating things they shouldn't be eating, and there's a lot of reasons God told us not to do that. And that's probably a good one, is because there are repercussions. And unfortunately, even though we don't eat those things, when somebody else messes up, it messes it up for everyone. And
that's true. It causes human. Yeah. Well, and I was going to say this, as we think about Leviticus 11 and we think about the epidemics that have been in the world before, it makes us look forward to the kingdom that much more.
Oh yeah.
Because at that time, people are going to know the right way to eat, and people aren't going to make the mistake of, let me eat this animal and have no knowledge that, hey, and like you said, the primary reason God gave Leviticus 11 was for us to be holy and set apart to Him. But anytime you do something God says, there are physical benefits to it. And God knew, just like He did with Leviticus 13, God knew that there would be side effects from doing it.
Well, God could have created all animals clean for us to eat.
Sure,
if He wanted to. But he specifically chose to only create certain ones clean and unclean so that we could have to learn it from Him.
That's right.
And learn the lessons of obeying God or disobeying God, and listen to the Creator and what He has to tell us. And here's the thing about it: when we talk about disease and we talk about problems that we have, if everyone were keeping God's laws, like the laws and also the sanitation laws and the laws we have in the Bible, how much disease would there be in the world? Would there be any disease?
I mean, virtually extinct.
God's kingdom, it might not be anything magically disappearing. It could just be everyone finally following the rules.
Yeah, because God's already got the rules of the kingdom, and He says He tells you, He lays it out. If you follow these rules, these are all the blessings. So that's what's going to happen in the kingdom.
And these diseases will not come on you.
Yeah,
the diseases of Egypt. So.
Yeah, well, because Egypt was doing all kinds of crazy stuff, and the reason why He tells you not to drink blood and all kinds of stuff that can cause all kinds of harm.
That's true.
To your body.
That's true.
And cutting yourself and things like that. So,
But we're not much smarter today. I
Yeah.
mean, on every box of cigarettes, I'm pretty sure there's a warning that says, hey, you know you're buying poison, right?
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
Well,
Doesn't stop. I mean,
and if you think about it, in Isaiah chapter 2, verses 1 through 5, when we see these verses about the millennium, and the nations will say at that time, because in our present world, Satan has blinded the minds of people from receiving the gospel. But in the millennial reign, when Satan's been put in the abyss, he's put away for 1,000 years. In the millennium, the nations will say, "Come, let us walk in the light of Jacob." So they're going to see that it's foolishness for me to go against what God said. I want to walk in His light. I don't want these viruses, these illnesses, these sickness to come upon me. And that's very important for us to realize. Like you said, I think that even in the midst of this virus, it reminds us. What does it say in Revelation? The Spirit and the bride say, "Come." We want God's kingdom to come so that the world can know and live such a holy life, but a healthy life too.
Yeah, and again, it's for us that we in God's church keep God's laws. Do what you can for yourself, and God can take care of the rest in prayers.
right.
So that's what I say. Why worry about these kind of things?
It's true.
Just obey God's laws, and things will work out.
That's
Because
right.
we know, we know what would happen if all 10 commandments were kept.
Wow.
The peace in society and
It will be incredible.
it's going to be incredible when God's kingdom comes, and that's what we're here about, right?
We're here promoting the kingdom.
promoting the kingdom, the gospel of the kingdom, and hopefully, if anybody's out there who's watching, who's never heard about this before, and you're new to this,
Absolutely.
the Bible. Now, tell me about a little bit of Bible Sabbath. What resources y'all have that people can help? learn from.
Absolutely. So the Bible Sabbath Association was founded in 1945 to promote fellowship between Sabbath keepers and Sabbath groups, and to help tear down walls of division that might have existed between individuals or groups. And we have resources to encourage believers to obey God's commandments. So we have 2 websites. The first one is BibleSabbath.org, and that's our main website. Now, it's under some construction, so if it's kind of slow or looks kind of messed up, it's because we're actually building a new website with the help of Corbin Rose. Actually, he's going to be
good.
helping us out. Great guy. But our website, that's a blog where you can find weekly manna, we'll call it. You'll find your weekly manna, SabbathSentinel.org. That's SabbathSentinel.org. That's our online blog. We have fresh content every single week. In fact, this past week we had an article from Blake Silverstein on the Sabbath and how, though the Sabbath is a specific day and God has given us specific things to follow, there's a subjective element to it that we are to seek Him in prayer to obey the Sabbath. And so you'll find things like Sabbath history. You'll find things about how to apply the Sabbath, even deeper Sabbath meditations, things that will help you deepen your understanding of the Sabbath and the commandments of God. We have some free booklets you can download. If you go to BibleSabbath.org, under products, we have an area that's called free resources, and you can download some free booklets on Sabbath history, and there's even a beginner's guide to the Sabbath. So if you're new, like you said, and you just want to kind of get to the basics, that's a great place. We also have a booklet called Defending the 10 Commandments, and it will go through some of the same content we went through tonight, and it will identify some verses people take out of context and explain those. So I encourage you to go there, and we also have our public Facebook page is The Sabbath Sentinel. You can follow us at Sabbath Sentinel. That's our link there, and you can follow us, and you'll see encouraging Bible verses and blogs and other content. I tell you, we had something really interesting we posted. There's beavers that keep the Sabbath.
Okay, now you've got my interest. Beavers to keep the Sabbath.
Beavers.
Explain.
Okay, so there's a YouTube video about this guy. We posted it on our Facebook page. Go watch some about a 3-minute video. This guy watched beavers for 16 years. So we're not talking about a small sample size. He observed them every day, and he noticed that Sunday through Friday, same time in the morning, and just before evening, they were very active. But on Saturday, they did not leave their nest. So even creation bears witness to when the Sabbath is. I could get deeper in this maybe some other time we will. But chronobiology has shown that even some kinds of bacteria follow a 7-day cycle. And but yeah, that's one of the cool things that we posted this past week. I've never even heard of that. Beavers keeping the Sabbath, really? It sort of makes sense though.
It
the whole
sounds like
creation.
the beginning of a joke.
Yeah.
5 beavers start keeping the Sabbath.
Yeah.
They split off and form another colony. No, it's a joke.
Yeah.
That's a joke. That's terrible. I shouldn't say.
Well, that's amazing. So check that out.
Check it out.
Yeah, and also I do want to remind everybody who's watching, check out the CGI Digital Network app. We have a lot of resources there as well.
Great resource.
And sermons, and maybe some sermons you've done.
That's right.
Sermons I've done, Bible studies, all types of resources out there. We want you, if you're learning, to have what we have, Bible Sabbath, and all kinds of organizations out there. But we definitely encourage you to look into this yourself, to study this yourself if this is new to you. And for everyone else out there, we thank you again for joining us. We're going to get ready and take another break, and we'll do that, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Well, thank you again for joining us this evening for this show as we talk about anything that pertains to the Bible, whether it be Minecraft or beavers or anything.
I missed out on all that.
Yes, or anything in between.
I think the video, somebody had made a comment here. It's called Seventh Day Beavers. So I guess if you look up Seventh Day Beavers on YouTube.
Beavers? I was not here.
All right.
Okay.
Well, we'll have to show it to you later.
Get them involved in the
right.
DSA.
We got to see that.
Well, thank you again for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Yes. Have a good night. May God bless your Sabbath.
Thank you for joining us.
Bye.
Bye.